So this is week one, the podcast for going through the chapter one. So of this chapter, it's important for you to take away some key points. So I want to make sure that you are looking at and understanding that there are some changes that have happened with selling. So typically you think of salespeople as a very aggressive salesperson, always trying to follow up with you. And that is important. But it's slightly shifted because now we are a culture that really looks down on that kind of aggressive selling. So it also is a different type of sales. So we're going to look at the different types of sales in chapter one. So there is now the role of personal selling. As I mentioned in my overview, you should be looking at these in terms of yourself and what value you're going to offer a future employer. But if you look on page 5, it talks about the emergence of the relationship selling in the information economy. And again, the information economy began about 50 years ago, and it's where the economy has shifted from the emphasis of industrial activity or making products to an emphasis on information processing. So really more shifting from a product to a service. And while we do still sell products, we're now selling more services. So think of your internet, that is now a service that's provided. People call them products, but they're actually services. And that's the difference between an intangible and a tangible product. So tangible meaning something that you can touch. When you go to the grocery store and you get a gallon of milk, that is something tangible that you can touch. That is a product. A service, as I mentioned, is cable service or telephone service. You can't touch. You can touch a phone, a cell phone, and that is a product that Apple makes. But the service that Verizon offers you is through the wires that crisscross our nation and world, where the data packets that are transferred through, that's a service. You can't touch it. It's just an intangible. So now there are intangible services like Verizon provides, but they also provide customer service. So you now see customer service as being more prominent today, because if you're selling a product, you better have good customer service if somebody's having a problem with it. And if somebody has a service, you better have good customer service to service the service. So we've kind of shifted to that more information age. So it becomes important for you to think about that. There's also something to consider that you should look at, and that would be also on page 5, is the emergence of a relationship selling. And that is what I told you in my intro, is shifting to where I see you as a client, not as just a transactional customer. So the first step they say, and they talk about, is to develop a personal selling philosophy. And you do that by creating and looking at 3 things: adopt a marketing concept, a personal selling, and becoming a problem solver or a partner to somebody in solving their problems. So really, when you think about yourself and you're out in the marketplace, looking at when you're buying something, let's say you go out to buy a new TV. Well, why are you buying a new TV? Either your TV is broken or it doesn't have HDMI on the back, or it can't integrate with the Amazon Fire Stick. So you're out trying to find a new TV. Well, the person who's going to sell you a TV has to be knowledgeable about which TV is the TV that you need that works with a Fire Stick. So they have to figure out where your problem or your pain point is in order to be able to help you. So those are things that you should look at. Again, you can look at on page 6, it goes into the industrial economy and the information economy a little bit more, so you can understand how that shift occurred. But if you look at page 8, and it's figure 1-3, a lot of people have this misconception about what salespeople do. You think about somebody who's on the golf course, or you're going to dinners, or you're traveling all around it, and it sounds very glamorous. But as I mentioned in my overview, it's not always glamorous because you're always on and thinking and have to be strategic. But this breaks it down a little further. where it says that the average time that a salesperson spends is face-to-face selling is 26%. And I would argue that sometimes that face-to-face selling now has become either phone sales and or online sales where you're chatting with somebody online. So that 26% is really more engagement with someone. Then you have the sales prep that could be putting your sales proposal together, going out and doing your research on the client, going to their website, seeing what they do, seeing and doing a SWOT analysis, which we'll talk about later, where you're looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then there's administrative tasks that might be sending out emails or asking people in the company for information that you might need to put together a PowerPoint presentation to meet with them or to send out letters or different things like that. And then the traveling and the waiting. I've literally traveled to, let's say, Wichita, Kansas as one place where I sat in a parking lot for an hour waiting for my meeting. And then I went into my meeting to meet with the CEO of Coleman Camping Gear. And then I was there for an hour and went back home again. So I traveled from Michigan to Wichita, Kansas to spend the night, sit in a parking lot for an hour, go to my meeting, and then drive straight to the airport after I packed my bags from the hotel. So that took a full day of travel, from Michigan to Wichita, Kansas, from Wichita, Kansas back to Michigan for a 1 hour meeting. So there's a lot of time that salespeople spend in transit and or waiting for those opportunities to happen. So you just have to be strategic about how to use your time. It also discusses, typically on page 10, you look at the sales compensation. There's different levels of management within sales. There's also different types of salespeople. You look at, for example, I have done everything from retail sales, where I'm trying to upsell somebody at a store. Like they come on and say, I'm looking for cold medicine, and I go help them buy cold medicine. I've also done corporate sales where I'm paid six figures. But it's a different level conversation. I'm dealing with CEOs and vice presidents and purchasing departments, and they're wanting a certain caliber of salesperson. I'm also it's not a transactional sale. I am having to do a request for proposal, which can sometimes they're also called RFPs. I've done them, they're 800 pages sometimes. Sometimes they're 100 pages. I have to do PowerPoint presentations. I have to do contract negotiations. And I've actually sold 4 $20 million accounts, and then had a pipeline of 220 million in my pipeline of potential other sales that we're going through. So corporate sales, you can make a lot of money in corporate sales, but there's also a lot that's expected of you. And there's also a lot more opportunity for women in sales. You can see that on page 11. So there's a lot of opportunities for men and women and sales. But again, it's hard because not everybody feels that they are suited for sales. And if you start to think about sales as just relationships, it's like going out with friends when that's why you see a lot of salespeople that are friends with their customers, because you become friends with them. You're working on trying to help solve problems for them. You might be traveling and taking them out for dinner where you're getting to know them better so that, you can build a stronger relationship with them. Some companies allow that, some companies don't. So you get to know that, but really it's that relationship selling through the different channels. So when you're reading through this on page 13, you'll see that there's a diagram that talks about the service channel, the business to business channel, and then the consumer channel. That's business to business is called B2B. Business to consumer is called B2C. Business to government is called B2G. And again, those are you're looking at a different customer. Business to consumer, that's you going into the grocery store, you going into Best Buy, you are a consumer. So that is a different type of sales than B2B, business to business. That would be if, let's say, I was still working at Kelly Services and Plant Moran was trying to sell them that they, hey, let us come in and do your accounting work for you. That's a business to business transaction. So anytime a company is selling a services or products to another business, that's a different type of sale. The reason why they're typically higher. You're buying in bulk volume. You have very sophisticated needs. So there's a lot of different types of sales. And then you also have, if you look at that mix, there's direct salespeople, there's the distributor, there's retailers, there's consumers, so and manufacturers. There's a whole process. And that's the supply chain. Everything from the manufacturer to the consumer is considered the supply chain, and the salesperson is involved in that middle. So if you're starting to look through chapter 1, it's to give you this overview of what a salesperson is, the different types of sales, the types of management roles in the sales area, and some case studies like the one that is on page 17, learning about CRM systems. That is going to be helpful because, typically with salespeople now, you're on the go all the time. So, it was always hard to keep track of sticky notes and business cards and whatnot. So companies have moved to CRM systems. Those are customer relationship management databases. When you meet somebody, you put them in your CRM. You also are going to update it. Hey, I just had a meeting with this person. I just presented to this person. We're in contract negotiations. And that's now also used not just to keep salespeople organized, but it's also used by management to forecast when sales are typically going to, find out an answer, whether they've won the business or they didn't win the business. So usually there's a percentage that's placed on each step in the process, and we'll go through that more later. But for example, if I've just started talking to you, I'm at a 10% close rate. I'm not even close to closing you. It's just the very beginning of the process. Whereas if I am doing a presentation, I'm at probably about the 75% mark. I've got a lot of information. We've built a relationship. You've finally invited me in to do a presentation to your teams about what my product is. I'm getting closer. So again, management can look at that and say, wow, okay, well, they've got 18 sales that are in the pipeline and they're at 75%. So hopefully we'll hear from them soon. So they can start to make executive decisions based on knowing how much business is in the pipeline. So CRM databases are very, very important today. So really, as you start to look through chapter 1, it's just to give you this overview of the different types of, again, salespeople. Look at page 22, all the different types of training that is offered to salespeople, and also in different universities teaching sales. Because as I said in the interview, or the beginning introduction that I said, is that the last people in corporations that are typically laid off are your salespeople, because they are the most important people in the company for bringing in new business. Companies cannot succeed without salespeople. So there's some different models that can use online where maybe you don't need to have salespeople, but for the most part, you need to have salespeople, either working with your clients or trying to convince bankers to do business with you. So honing the skill set of a salesperson is going to be beneficial if you want to make this your career. But even if you don't, as I said in the very beginning, you are outselling yourself as a value added service, because your time is a service that you're now giving away to a future employer. You have to learn how to sell yourself in an interview. So what you're doing when you try to get jobs is absolutely no different than doing that for a company and selling their services. It's a little uncomfortable until you learn your company's products, their services, how to be able to navigate the company. But once you figure that in and it's dialed in, sales is so easy. Then it becomes, for me personally, I love the chase. It's like being a detective trying to figure out who I'm going to talk to in a company. How do I build that relationship? How do I learn where their pain points are? How do I just keep going until I win? So for me, it's very strategic. It's like a game of chess, and I absolutely love it. So again, as you start to learn, make sure that you do the chapter learning activities. Take a look at those because they will all be helpful when you take your quizzes in this. So make sure on page 30 or 26 that you're looking at the review questions and the application exercises, because again, they'll help you in the exercises. So that's it for chapter 1.